Like this is very formal. We're at this table.
It's so formal, yeah.
Like we're in a business meeting. Q1 figures.
No, it's fine.
We're under budget. That's very excellent.
So how's everyone doing? Yeah? Good. Are we doing like a Q&A format?
Check. There we go, we have a question mic.
Oh yes, a question mic. Perfect.
So, 2 seconds, let me get into the crowd.
I suppose.
Play the Benny Hill theme, damn it.
I'm guessing. I don't
Get the
know.
Benny Hill theme on.
Raise your hand.
And we've got a second one.
Question mic.
Oh, we
and
have
second
two
question
mics.
mic. We'll find you.
Anybody with hands?
Crowd.
Oh,
If you have
yeah. It's going to be a pain.
Can't wait to ask us.
Jesus, I love that they're
That'll be
playing
great.
it.
And, oh god, this is, I'm going to die.
You're gonna die. We're with you. It's okay. We love you.
You're not with me though!
Hey guys, what would you say was the most fun sort of cast that you worked with on a show?
The most fun cast we've worked with on a show. The cast of Black Butler has always been really fun, and we've gotten very close over the years. So what's really weird about dubs that you may not know is we don't record together. We record separately. In fact, sometimes we don't meet our... It's so lonely. We don't. Sometimes we don't even meet our fellow castmates until we do a con together. So the guy that plays Grell in Black Butler, Daniel Frederick, I didn't meet for 8 years until they invited all of us as a cast member, as a cast family, to this convention that was celebrating Black Butler in, I forget where, somewhere in the States. And I was like, Daniel Frederick? You're Daniel Frederick? Oh my God, we've worked together for like a decade and I've never actually met you. So it's really fun, but they're a fun group. That and the My Hero crowd, we're all friends because we do so many cons together. So the My Hero Academia crowd, really, really fun.
Yeah, mine would probably be the My Hero crowd's really fun. And also, there's a show called Gamers. It's pretty good. Brittany Karbowski plays opposite me in that one, and it's a good time.
We have another question? Is there another? No?
Anybody around here got any questions?
Oh, look, right
There was one right in front of you.
I was wondering if you could tell the Snuggie story.
Oh, the what story? The Snuggie story?
Yeah.
Oh God, the Snuggie story. It's still getting so much traction. So who here watches Hitalia? Yeah. I love this one person's like, like I watched it a little bit. God. So playing the voice of France was really a lot of fun, but we were recording it at the same time that I was recording the second season of Black Butler, so I would go down the hall, down the studio, literally I would be very British, very receive pronunciation for an hour or two, working on Sebastian, and then I would run down the hallway and have to be very French for Francis Bonnefoy in Italia. And one day I just couldn't do it. I couldn't make that switch over. My brain wasn't having it, and so I'm in the booth, and we had a deadline. I had to get my lines done that afternoon because there was a show that it had to go to a mix. And I'm like, I don't know. I kept slipping into Sebastian's voice. And then as a joke, the director was like, you have to do this. We literally have no time to reschedule. You have to find this voice like now. I'm like, I'm sorry. I've been doing this for 2 seasons. Why can't I do this? And I noticed there was a blue Snuggie on the floor that I think Caitlin Glass had left there because she gets rather cold in that studio. So I was like, I'm just gonna put this Snuggie on and see what happens. Something about the Snuggie tells me that would help me find the France voice. So I put it on and I looked ridiculous, and that's the best way to sound like France, as I found out. So I was like, oh.
Wearing a Snuggie.
And so the voice came out when I was wearing this ridiculous Snuggie. And after that, the director made it a contractual obligation that every time I was recording, I had to wear the Snuggie. And they put it in storage and would bring it out every time there was a new season. And so that was the thing. And then years later, we were premiering, I think, season 2 or 3, and we were doing this panel with the original creator and several of the original cast members from Japan. And we had a translator, several translators there who would kind of translate for them what we were saying and vice versa. It was a really, really cool panel. We don't often get the chance to meet our Japanese counterparts. And here we are, like, wow, we're meeting our counterparts and the guy that like makes the show. And I told the Snuggie story because someone asked me to, and I thought, oh, here it is. And I'm watching the creator's interpreter try to explain to him what a Snuggie is and why this grown man was wearing it so he could record. And he was just really confused, and he kept looking at me and then like asking his interpreter to clarify and then looking at me again and then asking, and then finally he just broke out laughing, and it really eased the room. And 2 years later, when the latest season of Hitalia came out, there's a blink and you'll miss it moment where France is wearing a Snuggie, and I was like, did we do that? Did we give him the idea? It was so validating. Like, it was just a little cutaway joke to, like, they're having a slumber party and all the other countries are wearing pajamas and France is in a ridiculous Snuggie with a little heart on it, and I lost my mind while recording it. I was
Amazing.
like,
Now, I have a question for you. Is that the Snuggie that's still in Studio A?
yep.
Yes! Oh!
12 years later, it's still in Studio A.
It's still there, you guys. We're recording a show right now called Midnight at Cult Civil Servants, and we're both in it as like leads, and that Snuggie is right there. I wear it sometimes when we record.
That's the magic Snuggie.
The magic Snuggie. I gotta do it for the gram. Gotta take a picture for Insta. Love it.
That Snuggie has a history. Imagine it must smell by now. I don't think they've ever washed it.
It needs to be washed.
Yeah, they should wash it. Oh.
It smells like France.
All right. Thank you. I love telling the Snuggie story. All right. Do we have another question?
Hi. I wanted to ask what it was like to go back to Steins Gate 0 again after such a long time since the first season.
It was excruciating. I hated every second of it. No, I loved it, but it was really hard to do because it's so emotionally, because for Steins Gate, when the first season hit, it was really close to my heart, and I had such a journey doing that show. I had a lot of, there's a moment where I'm actually having a breakdown, and they just used it because I didn't want to do the scene again. They were like, you can record the scene again, or we can just use the scene we tried to record, and you had a breakdown, because that actually works really well. And I was like, please use the breakdown. I don't want to do the scene again. It was really hard. But it took the first season about 12 episodes to get there, to get to that really dark, really emotional, fraught territory. The second, Steins Gate 0 starts there, and it just gets more and more harried until you're like, oh my God, what else can this poor guy go through? This is awful. And it was really emotional, but what was really cool is when it was coming down the pike, I knew, like, I went back and I watched the original series because I hadn't seen it in a couple of years, and it was cool when I suddenly realized that, like, Suzuha's very last line in the original series, they're in the time machine and she's going on her way, and the last thing she says to Okabe, she's like, see you in 7 years, by which she means when she'll be born. And but by which the creators meant in 7 years exactly to the day is when they released Steins Gate 0. So they knew what they were doing. Cheeky little so-and-sos.
So good. You were a wreck during that recording.
I was a wreck. Yeah. I'm glad I had Brandon at the time. I didn't have Brandon when I was recording the original, so I was just a wreck. But having Brandon when I was recording 0 helped, because, man, I came home every day just crying and ready to punch a wall.
Hold your French bulldog, baby. He loves you.
You just put Genji, our French bulldog, in my lap, and Genji would just be like...
His face was so cute. Just like that.
Thank you, Steins Gate. Very close to our hearts. Right. Yeah.
Hi. So, what's the most difficult voice that you've ever had to put on? And also, when's Spice and Wolf Season 3 coming out?
I'll answer your second question first. I don't know, but it can't happen soon enough. I want more Spice and Wolf. What's the most difficult voice you've ever had to do so far?
Salmon in Nambaka, because it's all gritty like this, and when he starts yelling like that, it's a lot after a while. If you've got like a 3-4 hour session of just Salmon, you know, I'd walk out and take a break, and just people would come up to talk to me, and I'd be like, nope. I need to rest.
And he's a classically trained singer, so he's very, very careful with his voice. You may have noticed, for those of you that heard the concert earlier. And so he'll be like, no, I mustn't talk.
I can't have dairy right now. I have a concert.
The hardest voice, there's been a few. I think one of the hardest, and it did a little damage to my voice, and I lost some of my upper range doing it, but it was worth it, was Scar in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, which was a really, really cool experience, because when the original Full Metal wrapped, I wasn't a voice actor at the time, so I didn't get to be part of it. Though, like, a big red letter day for me was when I got to be like an extra in The Conqueror of Shambhala, the film. And I was like, oh my God, I was a brand new voice actor at the time, and I'm like, I get to be in Full Metal Alchemist as like guard B or something, and I'm like, I literally say freeze and then get shot and killed. And I was so happy. And then 5 years later, they were doing the Brotherhood version, which was closer to the manga, which made me very happy. And Damien Clark, the original Scar in the English dub, couldn't reprise his role. He was in a film and couldn't contractually get out of it, so they needed a new Scar. And so Mike McFarlane, the dub's director, was like, "Hey, Tatum, do you want to do this?" And I was like, "Do I? I guess I do." So we kind of found the voice, and it was very gravelly and very rough, and when he yells, it's really harsh. But Mike was very careful to take care of me. Mike started work on Dragon Ball, so he knows what it means to sit in a booth all day and yell until your throat is bleeding. So he was like, we're gonna schedule you for like maybe an hour or two at a time and then give you a few days to rest, because that voice is not a natural voice for you, and it's really, really hard. This is what happens to your vocal cords as you're using that voice. And I'll have a very fond memory of the very first recording session I had as Scar, because I was so excited. I went in, and Scar's very first line, as we recorded it, and it was followed by, it went like this: "Foolish alchemists who turn their backs on the ways of God shall be punished," followed by me going, "I'm Scar." And that would happen between every take, and Mike would just look at me like, "What are you doing? You go from Scar to being like," every time. So, I love it. Thank you. Good questions. I've lost them.
Have you ever fanboyed whenever you met anyone like famous?
Where are you? Oh, there you are. Have I ever fanboyed? Have you ever fanboyed?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Tell us a fanboy story.
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, so Michael and I met at a convention where I was interpreting for the Japanese guests, because that's what I used to do with cons, is like translate for Japanese metal bands that would fly over the United States and other musicians. And I was driving to Galveston, which is east of Houston. It's in like South Texas, to work with someone, and I didn't know who it was going to be. I was driving and like, okay, cool. The promoter that I was working with calls me and says, "I can't be there. My wife is having a baby in Japan, and my business partner just was refused entry to the United States. So I need you to be me." And I'm like, okay, cool. And by the way, you are going to be running everything and interpreting for it Nobuo Uematsu, who's the Final Fantasy composer. And I freaked out. I was like, I can't do this. What is happening right now? Because like, not only is he a very famous person that I don't want to let down, but also like major childhood hero, musician, like made me want to be a musician, be just like the music, right? So when I met him, took a lot of effort to not freak out. I was just like, oh yes, Uematsu-san, oh hi, yoroshiku onegaishimasu. Oh my god, you guys. So there were a lot of moments of when he was not in the room of me going, okay, I can do this. It was great. But yeah, that was my fanboy moment.
And now anytime like he comes to the States, like if Brandon's there at the con, he's like, "Oh, I want Brandon to interpret for me." So it's like, "Hey you guys, Brandon interprets, like he's the preferred interpreter for Nobuo Uematsu." We played pool with him in Hawaii several years ago.
Pool.
He's totally tricks you. He starts out, he's a total shark, because he'll just be like, "Oh, I'm terrible at this," and he like misses shots,
bad.
and you're like, "Oh, I got this, old man," and then he just takes you to the cleaners. You're like, "Wow." That counted for me, getting to meet him. And by that time, you guys were friends, so I was like,
I was like, oh yeah, Uematsu-san's pretty cool. He's all right. He's fine.
I think for me, anytime I get to meet anytime I'm at a con and I get to meet someone who is associated in any way, shape, or form with Doctor Who, I have a little moment. Getting to meet John Barry was like that. And that was really fun. I was at 2 cons with him in a row, and the first one I just couldn't muster up the courage to go and, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. You guys that like come up to our tables and say hi, you're so brave. I don't understand how you do it. I can't do that. Even if like that's what they're there for, I'm like, I don't want to bother them. I can't possibly. I'm very shy. I know I don't seem it, but I'm actually very intensely shy when I'm not in public, like, working as an actor. It's just different vibe. I'm the sort of person that if I go into a Starbucks and order and they forget to put out my order, I'll just leave. I can't assert myself. I'll just go to another Starbucks. I can't do it. I can't. So I was at a convention with John Barrowman, and I was like, he's right over there. He's like 2 tables away. We're both signing. We're technically colleagues. I can run into him in a green room and be like, "Hi, nice to meet you, fellow actor." But I didn't know how to do it. I was like, I'm just gonna have to like, no, maybe whatever, I'm just gonna have to wait. And then I ran into him and he was like, hey, how's it going? And I was like, and I just run off. And he was like, who's the big idiot who just ran off? And I was like, I love you. I got to meet George Takei, and that was really cool because he was signing in the same table. Huh? Oh, okay, yeah. So George Takei was one of my heroes for a number of reasons, and he was signing at the same table as me, but at different times. So I was coming up to start my autograph session. He was just leaving, and he saw me. He was like, "Oh, are you next? I'm sorry. I kept the seat warm for you." And I was like, "He did the laugh!" And I'm like, sorry, Mr. Takei. Yes, thank you. And he shook my hand, and I was like, I'm never washing this hand again. Which is very creepy. Always wash your hands.
I had a wonderful interaction with George Takei. He was in a green room in Los Angeles at a convention, and one of my bands was the band there. The band was D, if you know the metal band D. And he was talking to the bassist using his Japanese, which was great, but he forgot a word, and just in the middle of this conversation with my bassist, he turns and he goes, does anyone know the Japanese word for map? And I was like, Mr. Takei, I believe that word is chizu. And he was like, chizu. Thank you. Chizu, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, it's Mr. Takei. He was just help George Takei with his Japanese.
It happens a lot. It happens. We go to cons and especially cons like this, you're like, I'm sitting here with Darth Vader. Shh, don't tell him.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool. So, yeah, thank you. All right, next question. I can ramble all day. Yes.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm really nervous, I'm sorry.
I get you. Big mood.
Great.
This is for both of you, but Tatum, on your story you mentioned that you saw a farmhouse and you thought it was haunted, potentially. It looked very haunted. And I was wondering if you had a favorite haunted place in the world.
Yeah. Oh, my favorite haunted place in the world? Oh, that's tough. I'm kind of an aficionado of hauntings and stuff like that. I do a podcast with Jamie Markey called Ghoul Intentions. You should listen to it. We've been doing it for several months now, and we kind of focus on classic hauntings. We do a historical background. Some of my favorites, man. I'm blanking on the name of it's Henry VIII's palace. That's which one? Yes, Hamilton Court. That's one of my favorites because it's a gorgeous building, but it has so many. Every room has a ghost, and it has a story with Henry in it. So that's one of my favorites, especially the one where it's what was it, Catherine? You can watch her or hear her running down and screaming down the hallway, and I'm like, oh, a screaming ghost, clever, oh, charming. And in the United States, ooh. It's not a haunting per se, but my favorite weird incident is the Mothman incident in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, which I obsessed over for years. Yeah, do you have a favorite?
I do. Mine is in Dallas. There's a very old hotel called the Adolphus, and the Adolphus has a ballroom near the top floor, and the ballroom is haunted. You hear big band music that used to be played there, and it's creepy, and there are spots that suddenly you get cold in, and it's
They gave us a tour of the place. He took me there for my 40th, and we're me and Jamie and Alexis and all of us are kind of just at the bar going, this is really cool, very haunted vibe, and we're like, if you ever go to a haunted hotel anywhere, and you guys probably know this because you live here in England, everything is haunted. Everything is haunted, and that's great. Awesome. I'm a little jealous. Because in the United States, things get torn down and built over all the time, so nothing really feels haunted unless it's been there for 40 years. Ooh, history. But the Adolphus has been there for 100 years, and that's really old for America. That's
old.
That's half America's age.
Yeah.
And so we went there, and if you're ever at a haunted hotel in America, if you want the good stories, you go to the staff, the security staff or the concierge staff, and they'll be and you just kind of go hey, this is weird. Do you have any ghost stories? And they go,
yes.
Yeah, I do. Yes. Meet me back here at midnight. I'll give you guys a little tour. Maybe just tip the guy. And so we did, and he was we're gonna take you to the ballroom, which was no longer operational. It had been the toast of Dallas for years. This ballroom, it was where all the major big band leaders had played there in their day, and it became as that kind of style of music and dancing went out of favor. It just kind of became a wedding venue and a banquet hall, and then it just kind of fell out of favor because the rest of the hotel was going into renovations, and it just never did anything with it. It just became this big, massive, once gorgeous storage room But they were in the process at the time of renovating it to reopen it as this really cool swing-era nightclub-themed place, which they have since done, and it's really awesome. But at the time, they were still constructing it. And as you probably know, if you guys want to stir up some ghosts, renovate. They don't like that very much. They come out and be like, hey, we don't like where you're moving that, and they'll do all sorts of things. So this guy took us on this tour, and he's like, yeah, we'll go through the kitchens, we'll go through all the corridors, and we'll take you to some of the haunted spots that, other people don't get to see, and then we'll finish off in the ballroom. We're like, we can go to the ballroom? Because it's not accessible anymore, except through some, employee-only pathways. So we went up there, and he's like, you're gonna experience something, like every night something happens. And we walked in, and you could hear footsteps all over the place. We walked through a cloud of cigar smell, and we're like, what? He's like, yep, that happens. We could hear someone walking on the catwalk, running across the catwalk, and it was moonlit because there's this big skylight on this one half of the room, and you could see everything, and there was no one up there. But you hear this click, 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 click. We're like, what is that? He's like, yep. He's shining his flashlight around. Yep, nothing. Welcome to the haunted ballroom. And for him, it was, for our tour guide, this was so blasé. It was so an everyday occurrence. He's like, yeah, that's a ghost over there. Hi, ghost. And it's another, hi, another ghost. And we're all holding to each other like, oh my God, this is how we die, guys. But it was awesome. Yeah, that was a great experience. Thank you for I love the ghostly questions. We do. It's kind of my thing. Oh yes, now we have another question.
Right. So what is your most embarrassing moment at a con? Most embarrassing.
Yeah, I have one. Okay, so we were in Hawaii. And this was still when my interactions with cons was always as an interpreter working. And so we did an East meets West panel where Michael was on the panel and there was a Japanese voice actor, Takahashi-san, and he's done a lot of stuff with Yu-Gi-Oh! And so he was seated next to me, and Michael was also seated next to me. I was in the middle. And so when a Japanese voice actor was talking, I'd just kind of be whispering in his ear what he was saying in English, and vice versa. Well, someone asks a question about Borderlands, and his character, Sir Hammerlock, if you don't know, has some interesting interjections in the game. And one of them is the phrase, oh, Bonafart. I can't do it.
Oh, Bonafart. We're going to call them Bonafart.
Yes.
And yeah, that's a line.
That's an actual line. So I'm interpreting for Mr. Takahashi next to me, and it's like Japanese, and then Bonafart. And I'm like...
There's not a word for that in Japanese.
So I try to couch it. As an interpreter, you have to provide context when there's no context. And there's one that really needs some context, or else he's going to look at me and be like, excuse me? How awkward would that be? Anyway, so I explain it, and then as I'm explaining it, I have suddenly completely forgotten the word for fart in Japanese. I cannot remember, what is the word for fart? I've been interpreting everything, no problem. I got the first part, got boner, got it. The second part, fart. Oh my gosh. And without that word, normally you can just interpret around it, but I can't explain a fart and be like, that thing that happens when, there's not a lot of time. So I'm freaking out. Luckily, there's a Japanese person seated on the front row, and I look over and I'm like, hey, what's the word for fart? And he just dies laughing. He's like, it's onara. I'm like, oh right, onara. Yeah, boki onara. And he laughs. And he looked over and he was like, what? It was great. It was great. But it was very embarrassing, too, as an interpreter, to be like, oh boy, okay, here we go.
I have a lot of embarrassing moments, but this makes me think of one in particular. So when we go to cons together, Brandon will frequently, we'll be in the green room, and if there are Japanese guests, the Japanese guests tend to be very reserved, and they tend to keep to themselves. They're often very jet-lagged, and they don't have much English, so they tend to be very, they kind of keep to themselves, and they have, they have a team of interpreters there to help them, but the interpreters aren't there to instigate conversation. They're there to make themselves available if one starts, so they're just kind of hanging out. Well, Brandon sees them.